another episode of The Lighter Side with Dr. Ortiz. I am your host. I'm a surgeon, as you may know. And if you don't, well, look me up. And this is a wellness show. And it's a wellness show that talks about basically being healthy from a metabolic standpoint. And today we're going to talk about who is a candidate for weight loss surgery. And we're going to skip the interview. We've got a ton of interviews online. Please look us up. By the way, if you're on social media, just look us up, follow us, like us. You know the drill. And share it with your friends. Sometimes it takes something video like this to inspire those that need a helping hand to get to the next level. And sometimes it is weight loss surgery. So let's talk about weight loss surgery. And I'm going to start off with this first question I got online directly from a interested party. And they ask, how overweight do I have to be to consider surgery? And let me tell you guys, in the United States, medicine is very different than the rest of the world. If it was up to me, I would like to do surgery on folks that are not overweight. And I'll explain. In the US, the only way you can get weight loss surgery if you're extremely overweight. This means that you've not just gained 50 pounds, you're way over 100 pounds, and you have diseases like high blood pressure, high blood sugar, diabetes, of course, or heart problems, or sleep apnea, sleeping disorders. And then they will consider you for surgery. Now, why is that? This is not a medical consideration. This is an economic consideration. Insurance companies or health carriers, health insurance carriers, are out there to make money and to take money from you, not to give you and provide health. So that's why they're always going to deny procedures that are costly. The average cost of a weight loss surgery is over $30,000 to $40,000 in the United States. So they would rather not pay that bill and wait till you change insurance companies and stick it to the next man. So when you hear that somebody was denied, they weren't denied because they didn't medically it was not medically necessary. They were denied simply on the economic basis that it's too costly. And they would rather you be almost dying of the disease before they actually approve the cost of a weight loss surgery. Having said that, we're of a different philosophy. And this is why we provide weight loss surgery in an international center with the same and sometimes higher standards than the US, but we provide it preemptively, early on. Who is a candidate for weight loss surgery? Anybody who's overweight, 20, 30 pounds? And you might question, doctor, what do you mean 20 pounds? Well, I mean, if you're overweight 20 pounds, you're probably struggling with excess weight, and it's not going to get any better. It gets worse. I've never heard of somebody that's like, oh, well, I had 20 pounds excess weight and it's magically disappeared, and now I'm extremely thin. That doesn't happen without an extreme effort. The natural history of the disease, of metabolic disease and obesity, is that if you gain weight, every time you lose it, it's going to be harder. If you can lose it, it's going to be harder to lose it again. And when it comes back with a vengeance. So, having said that, who are my ideal candidates? Those that have some excess weight, 20, 30 pounds, I don't care, and that have metabolic impact. What does that mean? Metabolic impact means that your blood sugar is creeping up, your blood pressure is creeping up, your triglycerides, your cholesterol. All these things lead to disease and lead to death. Almost 70% of the people you know are going to die from metabolic syndrome, which means they're going to die either from high blood sugar, complications of high blood sugar, high blood pressure, which usually is a heart attack, or high insulin, which usually is cancer. 30% of the population is going to die from heart attacks and 30% from cancer. That's 60%. And if you add to that Alzheimer's, dementia, stroke, other complications from diabetes, renal failure, etc., that's 7 out of 10 people that you know right now are going to die from that disease. So Why not treat it right now? Because literally, a weight loss surgery can save your life. You don't have to be overweight to get it. You can be minimally overweight, but if these markers are changing, if you have less than ideal profile, they're gonna get worse. Yeah, of course, you're gonna go to your doctor and they're gonna medicate them, but they're putting makeup on the lesion. They're just kind of medication does not cure anything. Medication cannot cure your diabetes. It controls the blood sugar, more or less. But sooner or later, you're going to need more and more and more medication and you still get the complications of diabetes. Same thing with hypertension. In fact, you guys know now if you're 120 over 80, that's the numbers that you get when you're measuring your blood pressure. It used to be you were fine. Now it's hypertension or pre-hypertension. By the way, pre-diabetes as well. Raise your hand if you have diabetes. Well, 1 out of 10 is going to say, oh, I have diabetes. Nah, wrong. We're measuring it wrong. 5 out of 10 people in the U.S. have diabetes. 5 out of 10 adults have diabetes. That means 52% of the U.S. population is either pre-diabetic and diabetic. And I've always said pre-diabetes is like being a little pregnant. Either you are or you aren't. Pre-diabetes is diabetes. Just give it a little time. So this is not bad news, this is good news. There's only 3 things that can cure metabolic syndrome. Intermittent fasting, low carb lifestyle, and weight loss surgery. And we offer all 3 to our patients at the same time, which basically is like hitting it with a sledgehammer and saying, I don't want to be sick anymore. All right, let's go to the next question. And the next question is, who is a candidate for weight loss surgery? Well, actually, I just answered that one. So let's go to the third question. And it says, is there any limit to have bariatric surgery? So yesterday I did surgery on a patient whose mama is so overweight and 300 pounds. And she says, well, unfortunately, my mama's too old for weight loss surgery. How old is she? She's 80 years old. And she's lived with that weight? Oh, yeah. It's like she's an ideal candidate for weight loss surgery. I don't care if you're overweight. If you're more or less healthy at 80 years of age, you can benefit from weight loss surgery. Being overweight, being obese, yeah, you can stabilize, but can you imagine what it is to live with 300 pounds of excess weight at that age? You're already hurting everywhere, and yeah, there are happy, healthy individuals that are obese, but nothing is better than being at a good weight with a great metabolic profile. So on the extreme end of things, you can be 60, 70, 80 years of age. We don't really care. We just do all the due diligence on that patient's health, get them approved from a safety profile standpoint, and once they're approved, in other words, cross all the T's, dot all the I's, cardiac testing, everything that's needed to do, and then we will perform weight loss surgery. And on the other extreme end of things, weight loss surgery is not just for adults. The biggest problem we now have in the United States and other developed countries that are obese is obesity in adolescents and liver disease in adolescents. For the first time in history, the number 1 cause of liver disease is not alcohol. Now it's sugar. And when you consider that out of the 800,000 products in the processed food market, 70% of them have sugar, fructose, then we're in for a big surprise from a health standpoint. Over almost 50% of our Latin and African American kids in the U.S. have fatty liver disease, and that in turn leads to cirrhosis, and that in turn leads to death, or an early death. So it's extremely important that we understand that processed foods are killers. I studies now saying it. Processed food will kill you. It's no coincidence that when processed food appeared on the map, all these diseases that were unheard of, practically from diabetes, cardiac problems, cardiac disease, even cancer, was also extremely low. So keep away from processed foods. And if you have an obese child, consider weight loss surgery, as it is a 20-minute procedure. There's different types of weight loss procedures, but you can even be, my youngest patient is 10 years old. Mother and father had had a previous weight loss surgery. He was heading the wrong way. He was already diabetic at 10 years old, did weight loss surgery. A couple of weeks later, his blood sugar normalized, and that happened 6 years ago. So he's basically 16 years of age, looking like a stud and enjoying life healthy. So those are all the questions we had today. And last but not least, I am going to change really quickly to another slide. And let me go to my presentations. And I'm going to show you one last slide, which is really important, and I think that it'll be great to see that this is a comparison of the pandemic of COVID, which unfortunately has ravaged the world, and over 2 million people, I've even lost count, this slide is like a month old, have died, but it doesn't compare to what metabolic syndrome does on a yearly basis. And metabolic syndrome is basically the following. What is metabolic syndrome? Please pay attention. If you're going to pay attention to anything, pay attention to this slide and share it with people. Metabolic syndrome is not just obesity. Yes, you can be obese and have metabolic syndrome, but metabolic syndrome causes diabetes, causes cardiovascular disease, causes cancer, causes dementia, causes stroke, causes non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, causes polycystic ovarian syndrome. If you are infertile as a woman, there's a probability you have metabolic syndrome. Causes erectile dysfunction, causes migraine headaches, arthritis, and many other diseases we are still working on. And what is the main common factor with all of these? It's called insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is what causes metabolic syndrome. Insulin resistance is basically as you age, you don't even have to age, like I said, even kids have it, you become less sensitive producing, thus you have to produce more insulin. And as you produce more insulin, your resistance becomes even further. Like when you wear perfume in the morning, you can smell it, but after 15 minutes you can't smell it anymore. It's not that the perfume basically dissipated. Sensors became less sensitive to them. Same thing with insulin. The more insulin you produce, the more resistant you become to that insulin, because those receptors become more resistant to that insulin. So you need more and more insulin. And what happens is that when your insulin is very high, it causes metabolic syndrome. What's the number one manifestation of metabolic syndrome? Diabetes. So that's why 52% of the US population has diabetes. And when we look at this slide, we look at the United States. It's now calculated that 52% of the population is diabetic. And the problem with this is that when we do testing with the normal tests available or that are mainstream in the medical science, we are using tests that underdiagnose diabetes. This is basically a slide where it shows a study that was developed in the 80s by a Dr. Kraft, and these are called Kraft curves, and these measure insulin after having sugar. They don't measure blood sugar after having sugar. And it's interesting to see that the results were that they found that 76% of the patients that weren't diabetic were actually diabetic. It was just a matter of time for them to become diabetic. And one of the most important things is that if this still hasn't caught your eye, let me show you this slide. This slide shows that 2/3 of the patients with heart problems that were not diabetic, once you start digging into their clinical history, they found out that they were diabetic. So here I'll show you this last slide, and this is how we're going to end the study. This is a incredible physician, scientist, Dr. George Alberti Professor George Alberti from the World Health Organization, and we were discussing basically the pandemic of obesity and metabolic syndrome. So, in conclusion, it's not just about the excess weight. Excess weight is an important part of it, but even if you don't have excess weight, but any of these biomarkers we were talking, which is the circumference of your belly, your blood sugar, your blood pressure, your blood insulin, and your triglycerides and cholesterol, if any of these have changed over the years, you have markers for metabolic syndrome, and they're not going to get any better even if you treat them medically. The only way to treat them is either through intermittent fasting, low carb lifestyle, and or weight loss surgery. At OCC, we use them all. All right, I'm out of time. I got to run to the operating room.